Welcome to Dozee CareTech, Embracing Tech to Improve Patient Safety, curated by DH Brandspot. I'd like to welcome our chief guest for the evening, Dr.Ajai Kumar, Executive Chairman, Healthcare Global Enterprises Limited, our elite doctors, nurses, and guests present with us. Today, we are living in times where nurses and nursing have become more critical than ever before. While everyone knew the crucial role they play, the pandemic put them in a spotlight, and they became the first line of defense, be it in a clinical setting or on field. And while many of us stayed at home, they stepped in with courage, compassion, and care, and in the most tethering and trying times. Around the world, nurses are working under enormous pressure, providing care to patients. Many are faced with increased stress and other negative effects on their mental health. They're also faced with the possibility of infection and death due to COVID-19. It's time that we come together to recognize them, to empower them, and to let them know that we care for them. One of the ways to do so is to provide them the right tools and technology for the job. As more of the population ages, as life expectancy increases, even as shortage of nurses continues, it is imperative that focus is laid on equipping them with technical and technological wherewithal to deal with new demands in healthcare. At this conference, we will bring together the nursing heads of various multi-speciality hospitals, both private and public, elaborate more on how technology can enhance nursing endeavors in delivering top-notch patient care. The event will also celebrate and recognize nursing efforts for delivering their unmatched patient care. Ladies and gentlemen, impact assessment study conducted by Sattva Consulting shows how India can unlock the potential of connected healthcare and save over 2,200 crores in public healthcare system. By upgrading hospital beds to Dozee beds across public healthcare facilities, we can optimize ICU resources, reduce the burden on nursing community, and improve patient outcomes. So let's all take 2 minutes time and watch this video to know more about the impact.
It's time to unlock the power of connected healthcare in India. According to social impact consultancy Sattva, India can save rupees 2,200 crore annually by upgrading hospital beds to connected beds. The country faces an acute shortage in resources. WHO recommends one nurse for every 333 people. India has only one nurse for every 588. We have just 5 beds per 10,000 people and merely 50% of the required ICU beds capacity. The truth is, our public healthcare infrastructure urgently needs a technology-driven transformation. That's where Dozee comes in. Dozee is a contactless remote patient monitoring and early warning system, a truly made-in-India innovation that upgrades any bed into a step-down ICU within minutes. The Dozee sensor sheet is placed below the patient's mattress to capture the vitals. The information can be remotely viewed by the clinicians through a central command center and mobile apps. Dozee's AI-powered early warning system enables timely alerts for early intervention. Sattva's independent study observes that Dozee reduces ICU stays by 1.3 days per patient, and nurses spend 80% lesser time in monitoring patient vitals, helping them save 2.5 hours at work every day. According to Sattva's study, 100 Dozee beds can save potentially 144 lives every year and deliver 26% cost savings in ICUs. Cumulatively, it saves rupees 2.7 crore per year per 100 beds. While doubling the critical care infrastructure of India, the technology will save India's public healthcare system a whopping 2,200 crore rupees annually and rupees 11,000 crore in the next 5 years, transforming the public healthcare and setting a new global benchmark. One Dozee bed at a time.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have Mr. Randeep, who has joined us, the IAS Commissioner, Health and Family Welfare Government of Karnataka. He's been instrumental in setting up state-of-the-art softwares, including Index, CHPMS for COVID management in Bangalore, which was further extended across the country. He has integrated queuing system and public dashboards, thereby enhancing transparency. He has organized mega vaccination camps working 24/7 and opened 2 locations and plans to open 8 more. And special drives have been started by him for regular immunization and nutrition of children. He has integrated app for surveys, patient data tracking and surveillance fast implemented at PHC level. So we'd like you to please join us on stage to deliver the keynote address.
Thank you, everybody. And I would like to say that I am not a doctor. I know very less of the medical field. But what I'm speaking is only of the experience that COVID has taught us in terms of how we need to be prepared. Because 2018 it was when I joined BBMP. The government systems were largely in place, but obviously, as it's been told, one can never be ready for something like COVID, which hit us in early 2020. Now, the kind of setback that we faced, we realized that we had not automized many of our systems, we had not digitized many of our process flows. Most of it was basically word of mouth or individual excellence of the concerned doctors. So as BBMP Health, we took a lot of effort in terms of racing against time, in terms of putting some kind of a basic queuing system, even to ensure that critical patients get to bed. So we were as basic as that. Of course, we got a lot of support from the private entrepreneurs, the medical fraternity at large, corporate hospitals, who all came together that time to help us put systems largely in place. And today, moving on from city health to the state health, which I'm heading now, I can safely say that we are on a much better digital platform. We have much better control in terms of data, in terms of remote monitoring. Our telecounseling systems are largely in place. Our remote monitoring systems are fairly good in place. To speak of Dozee itself, we have seen how well it's done in the Jayanagar General Hospital, which otherwise was almost on a manual mode. And we look forward to kind of ensuring that many more hospitals come under Dozee kind of a system. These are exciting times where technology is coming together with medical science as well as administration. So this triage is kind of going to help us reach greater heights. What are the gaps that, as a government servant, which I am looking at, someone as an administrator of health, if you look at from the perspective of rural folk today, what is it that I would expect? I mean, you see crowded hospitals. Do we have solutions today that can enable the free movement? I always wondered why there is not much queuing in the corporate hospitals, how token systems work better, how QR code automated self-registrations work much better. Probably is it because we have not tried it in government setup, or whether we are afraid to kind of open that up. But with ABDM coming up, the Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission, we don't have much of a choice. As all of you are aware, Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission for the first time is trying to get 3 stakeholders on board. It's trying to get the beneficiary or the patient through what is called as an ABA ID, the Ayushman Bharat Health Account ID, which is a unique ID linked to the Aadhaar at the back end. Then you have the second stakeholder, who are the health professionals, all of you who are here. So you will have something called as the Health Professional Registry ID, by which you would be known on the ABDM environment. And lastly, most importantly, you have the hospitals, which would come under the HFR, which is known as the Health Facility Registry. Now, the fourth component is obviously the most important, is something which links all of this. So we have the linkage of the health records for the first time. And even as I speak, if you look at the ABDM dashboard today, you'll find for the first time probably in the history, you have 25,000 patient records in Karnataka today linked digitally, which means if this patient comes to a hospital and he gives the reference, he or she gives the reference of the ABA ID, we are able to retrieve his or her health records at a click of a button, which was probably not seen earlier. We'd had to send him to the OPD section, thereafter try and locate his records by first name, second name, then send him to the actual doctor who would then ruffle through those old sheets to see if he was an earlier patient or not. Many a time we will not even think about it and re-register the patient. So there's a lot of redundancy which was involved. Today, which we are seeing is gradually disappearing. Government hospitals are also gearing up to come into the digital era. And if you look at our HMIS system, which was probably not in great shape 2 years back, with the NIC's e-hospital portal coming up, today I have most of my taluka hospitals, most of the district hospitals, the medical colleges on this e-hospital platform. Not the best HMIs in the world. We have better examples of corporate HMIs, but for a start, a great way to learn to work online, a great way to ensure that records are safely kept and records are accessed much easily. So these I would cite as exciting times. Of course, today one is talking also about remote monitoring. We have examples of our own neighboring states which no longer expect a patient to come to the hospital. So they have this clinic in a bag concept where they have all kinds of IoT devices, and I myself have witnessed many of such pilots on the ground where we have amazingly beautiful reports just being beamed live thousands of kilometers away to our district hospital, and the patient's remotely sitting, and we are able to access his exact health condition. Of course, I did appreciate the kind of challenges that the doctors were reporting in the panel discussion. There are, of course, medical legal issues. Who takes the responsibility, whether it's the person on the ground or someone who's remotely monitoring. There are data privacy issues. Now, all this has to be legally also backed up. I mean, I think digital alone is not the solution, but unless we have data privacy laws in place, we have laws which protect doctors against any kind of legal issues in the coming days, we will not be able to push through all of this in a very coordinated manner. We are looking at even concepts like e-prescriptions now, X-rays and CT scan reports, which were those large films. We're looking to make them completely digital across our district hospitals, at least for a start, so that people really don't have to carry those large films and come for consultations. We are also looking at having consultations online, because this is something which the Honorable Health Minister, when he visited the Jayanagar General Hospital just a few days back, he was just wondering that why haven't you thought of having a self-registration kiosk, which I just happened to visit a corporate hospital a few days back, and I was seeing this huge rush of patients or the relatives not registering at the manual counter, but they were all lined up at the digital self-counter, and the ease with which they were registering and the ease with which the PRO there or the helper there was helping the patients to quickly register, there was lot less redundancy and waiting time that was there. So these are something which I would like to see overall the hospitals to come up to this particular level, and Dozee especially is fairly impressive. We've gone through their working over the past few months and what advantages that one can see by their use. We're looking to do a bit more of pilots in a few of the hospitals under me, and thereafter we will see how best we can ramp it up so that what the impact study actually showed in terms of saving of the doctors, nurses' time, in terms of saving of the overall healthcare costs. If that can kind of be proved on a larger scale, I think we will be in good hands in the coming days. So I thank CareTech for having organized a session like this. I mean, it is a good opportunity for all of us to come, get together, understand each other's challenges. Digital technology comes with its own challenges. We've seen how it can be misused at times. So I think what is very important is also to have a very strong legal framework so that none of us do get into any kind of issues for doing our work honestly. Thank you for the organizers for having invited me here. I'd not like to keep all of you captive for too long. Thank you for inviting me, and hope to collaborate with all of you in the future, and so that Karnataka becomes one of the premier states in adopting digital technology in healthcare. Thank you.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, this evening we have with us Dr. Ajai Kumar, the Executive Chairman, Healthcare Global Enterprises Limited. Dr. Ajai Kumar, following his MBBS from St. John's Medical College, Bangalore, he completed his residency training in oncology from the University of Virginia Hospital and fellowship in radiation and medical oncology from the renowned MD Anderson Hospital in Houston, Texas. While building his practice in the US, he founded Bharat Hospital, an Institute of Oncology, a Mysore-based not-for-profit hospital in the year 1989. At the same time, along with a group of oncologists, he incepted the Bangalore Institute of Oncology. As the center grew from strength to strength, Dr. Ajai Kumar sensed the need for improving accessibility, affordability, and quality cancer care in India. In the year 2003, Dr. Ajai founded Healthcare Global Enterprises Limited, a hub-and-spoke institution headquartered in Bangalore, with multiple centers spread across India to make cancer care accessible and affordable, while also ensuring high quality through linear accelerators even in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities. Healthcare Global is sterling validation of Dr. Ajai Kumar's unflinching belief that cancer can be treated only one way, the right way, the very first time, to help patients achieve longer and better lives. Healthcare Global has revolutionized cancer care in India through high-end technologies like CyberKnife and TrueBeam, as also advanced bone marrow transplant therapies and molecular imaging. Healthcare Global has also established 26 comprehensive cancer care centers so far, and Dr. Ajai Kumar has been conferred the prestigious E&Y Startup Entrepreneur of the Year Award as well as the Asian Healthcare Leadership Awards. Harvard Business School has done a series of case studies on its unique focus factory model, and Dr. Ajai has given inclusive talks at reputed academic and corporate organizations including the Harvard Business School and the Babson Business School. Ladies and gentlemen, would like to welcome Dr. Ajai Kumar to deliver the keynote address. With a big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it out for Dr. Ajai Kumar. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank Dozee and Deccan Herald for having invited me. And I think hearing about Dozee definitely tells you how technology can be brought to the doorstep of the patient and how technology can make a big difference, particularly in a country like India. In my own journey in 45 years in oncology, being in the US for 28 years and now in India for the 20 years, I know how we have an opportunity to leapfrog in healthcare in India using technology. SCG has always been in the forefront of technology, but today, the digital technology which has come, I think will revolutionize how we approach the care. And the most important aspect of technology, as I will show in the next few minutes, is how outcome measures is what we should go for. And as you heard from Dozee, really how we improve, bring down the cost, improve the outcome, better care to the patient, not only in big urban areas, but how do we bridge the gap to the semi-urban and rural areas. As we all know, India is a vast country and we have various challenges which we face today. India is urban, rural, and by some standards, we know urban India is well served. And as you can see, India is a country which is multiple countries within a country. When you travel across the world, United States population is 350 million, Europe is 350 or so. But India has two countries. One is 300 to 350, moving up the economic ladder, middle class, upper middle class, demanding the highest form of healthcare. And then we have another 900, which is trying to, grapple with healthcare, education, which feels they are left out. The idea is, how do we bridge the gap? Enormous task, but we have done very well. 350 million is as big as US. We have done extraordinarily well in healthcare. And we don't take credit for that sometimes, because we look at the entire picture of 1.2 billion and say only 20%. But 20% itself is as big as United States of Europe. It's not an easy task. And when you look at the cost and how we manage at the cost, how technology has been used for years, unspoken, hub and spoke models, telemedicine, teleradiology, virtual tumor boards, all of this has been in the works. And today to see what Dozee shows and all, it is Indian made. We should be very proud of what we are able to achieve and showcase the world. The problem with us is we don't produce enough data. Our outcomes are great in urban cities, definitely when you look at cancer, heart disease, even diabetes, but we lack putting out the data. Western world is phenomenal in putting out the data. We have thousands of cases, but we don't capture the data. So that is why I believe today we can really revolutionize the healthcare in India by simply collecting proper data using the technology, outcomes, and publishing it. Because I am convinced some of the data we have done in our own centers of 4,000 breast cancer patients in Bangalore, recently we curated by an independent data agency. We are, in breast cancer, we are equal or better than where I studied MD Anderson. So showing that we have a better outcome. But unfortunately, proper curation, proper putting the data and putting in the right format is what we have lacked in the past. And we have intelligence, as you all know. Indians don't lack IQ or intelligence. When you go abroad to Europe or to UK or US, most of the doctors are, in major cities are Indians running major corporations, Google or Microsoft or, Adobe or MasterCard, all run by Indians of origin. So we are damn good. But what is lacking in India today to bring this change, is what is really bringing this is what we have to undo. Unbound, I call it unbound India, is when we really showcase. And here is an opportunity for us. When you see Dozee, what are they doing? Various companies, startups, phenomenal work is going on. How do we encourage them? How do we bring them to the forefront? How do we measure the data to show these are the outcomes we have properly and accept at a global level and make a change? That is where I think we are headed. I think in the next, even 5 years, not even a decade, we can revolutionize healthcare. Whether, we have government support or not having government support, obviously will help. But sometimes, we feel government support, yes or no is also okay. We don't have to depend. Entire HCG model is without 1 rupee of government support or 1 inch of government land. So we can do it. And using, for example, the power of private equity, using how they invest. I have written articles about what is the difference between for-profit and not-profit. When you don't give dividend, there's actually no difference. So using that kind of enormous money which exists, and using value for them, each stakeholder. The investor may be a stakeholder. As doctors, we can achieve doing the right treatment for the patient, and patients will be very happy because the technology we put in. So India is ripe for this, and that is where I think we are headed. Cost is okay, but let us talk about outcome. The most important thing is cost and outcome. Unless you have good outcome, what is the point in doing at low cost? Unless you bridge the gap and show at low cost, also my outcome is going what we call as value-based medicine. So India can become the king or queen of value-based medicine. And that is where we should head as we move forward. As you can see, our technology is phenomenal. Every day, every 75 days in oncology, it is changing. Such a vast technology. How do we incorporate for our population? That is where I think digital health will play a major role. This is just to show what the opportunities are, particularly, my specialty being oncology, how it is going to grow worldwide, how it is going to grow in India, and how we can leverage by using technology. This is one of the most important things we are doing with Siemens. We are developing this technology-based thing where we look at managed data as a strategic asset. Very important, empower data-driven decision. and connect care teams with patients and build a learning healthcare system. These are the pillars for us using digital. If we can achieve that, I think we would have won the war on any disease in India, particularly like what Dozee showed, what other institutions are doing, what other startups are doing, phenomenal work going on in research, R&D work, we can achieve. How would you rate the digital technology is becoming clearly the managed data, empower data, connect care teams, building a health. This is where at a low cost we can build and make it accessible to everyone. Patients nowadays, virtual tumor boards, virtual hospitals, at home, as you saw here, by which patients don't have to come to the hospital. There is a saying now that patients don't have to move from place to place. It is the information which moves place to place. And we do today what we thought is impossible, thanks to COVID maybe. We know patients don't have to come for follow-ups anymore. Patients don't have to come except for treatments where we can beam into their house. For example, when we conduct our tumor boards, you have a medical oncologist, radiation surgeon, radiologist, pathologist, showing the X-ray pathologist, and we are talking all the experts when the patient is at home, sitting with the relatives, asking us questions. What was thought not possible few years ago, it is possible today. And this is the game changer for a country like India. Everybody has a smartphone. Internet is now moving into tier 2, tier 3 cities, as we know. With all this happening, it can revolutionize healthcare itself, even prevention, not only prevention, early detection, and, taking care of the problems, even certain blood tests, how we do, how we report. So this is how we can make a big difference, simulation, and of course, we all know AI. How do we create AI algorithms? Through this AI, how do we study the predictive analysis of the patients, their families? For example, if you look at smoking, I always feel if you ban smoking, 40% of the healthcare issues are gone in India. If you just ban smoking. By the way, we are involved in alternate farming for farmers of tobacco, because that I feel is the thing to do. I don't know why they are not able to do. There may be vested interest. But we can show data using this technology, AI, how a person with chewing or smoking is developing this disease. How just by not doing it, they save costs. We talk about cost saving. Enormous cost saving. All this Ayushman scheme probably won't be needed if smoking is banned tomorrow. But these are the things we have to produce evidence and show actual patient history. Effective integrated care is what we are looking at. This is where I will really stop to say integrate, engage, measure, and implement. Today, in a country like India, we had a lot of issues in the past. My own journey in the last 20 years coming back has been cobalt. We are not rich enough to take linear accelerator. Once we put in linear accelerator, we accepted it. We are not rich enough to put in PET scans. We are not rich enough to put, complicated machines, integrated treatment planning. All of that has been disproved. Today we can say, in a field like oncology or cardiology, in urban cities, big hospitals, private or some government, whatever we look at, we are on par with the world. We are on par with the best of centers. We may be even better in some sense. When you look at the value-based medicine, which is what the Harvard study did on us, show very clearly that this is happening, that there is outcome is good. Now, future, when you look at a tier 3 city, let us say Shivamogga, or Ranchi, where you want to do a complicated surgery. What we have done today using mixed reality, using the halos, Bangalore sitting surgeon who is an expert has been able to perform surgery virtually with a local surgeon, his avatar going there. This is not future, this is now. It has been done. Where actually a surgeon in Bangalore can tell where to make the incision, how to go for complicated surgery. This again, digital is going to make a significant impact in making sure the patients don't have to move, but we can move to their place and do this kind of complicated therapies and treatments. So future will look very bright, but we need multidisciplinary tumor boards, multi-experts working together, not only as doctors, but paramedical staff, technicians, and IT people. What we need is a big vertical in IT for healthcare. That IT should come together. What I see in India, one last word I want to say is, everybody wants to develop in their own silos. There is no integrated working together in India. Unlike other countries, European working group, US working groups are there, but India, we don't have a working group. Because everybody is a master. They know what they want to do. Everybody want to copycat others. But like drugs, we don't do any new drugs in India. Why? Because we are masters of copycat. Somebody does an invention, patent, we go and develop it very fast. We are very good in generics. Similarly, we have to do research. We have to spend money for research. We have to come together in working relationship between hospitals and IT people, R&D department. Without R&D, we cannot succeed. We cannot depend on West to say, I have developed this technology, then we kind of come and bring it here. We should develop and let them copycat us. And then we are proud of it. We become a proud nation. And that gives you the confidence and stability to move and take a leadership role in healthcare, particularly in digital health. With these few words, I want to thank you all for having me here. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Everybody, can we all hear it up with a bigger round of applause for Doctor, please? Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, with us we have Dr. Raghavendra Pai, Lead Consultant, Neuroanesthesia, Aster CMI. Dr. Raghavendra Pai is a renowned anesthesiologist with extensive experience in neuroanesthesia and critical care. He is an acknowledged expert in handling all types of neurosurgical cases. A meritorious and award-winning student, Dr. Raghavendra Pai, after completing his MD in anesthesiology, finished his PDCC in neuroanesthesia and critical care from the prestigious Nimhans deemed university. Besides his intensive medical practice, he is also known for his fervor towards mentoring the young medical talents. He's been associated with the MS Ramaya Medical College Hospital as professor for 13 years now. His expertise lies in handling equipment such as intubation techniques, anesthesia medicines, anesthesia circuits, anesthesia ventilators, ICU ventilators, monitoring systems, and ultrasound. He holds distinctions during his MBBS. He was also part of the organizing committee of the 17th Annual National Conference of the Indian Society of Neuroanesthesiology and Critical Care. He is also the Vice President of the Indian Society of Anesthesiologists. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Dr. Raghavendra Pai, who will be speaking on monitoring beyond ICU and imperative for 360-degree patient care. Please put your hands together, everybody, and let's welcome Dr. Raghavendra Pai on stage. Thank you.
Good evening. At the outset, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me today. For people who have been associated with managing critical patients, we encounter a lot of problems once patients, are ready to be discharged from our care. I can give you plenty of examples when we have had patients, who have been shifted from the operating room, from the post-operative care area to the wards, and ending up with, problems, say 4 or 5 or 6 hours in the wards, when nothing was wrong with them at the time of shifting. Similarly, when we shift patients from the ICU, there are various problems which can happen to these patients in the wards regarding their hemodynamics, regarding their respiration, the metabolic parameters, all can end up pushing the patient back to the intensive care. Now, the whole idea is how to monitor these patients, pick them up early before they end up into the intensive care, because then the burden on the
the hospital, on the critical care beds, the cost to the patient, which is, is very, very important in our country. How can you pick up these patients much before a disaster strikes? Now, this is something which all of us individually have been doing in the places where we are working. There are various things which, help us in picking up the patients early. Obviously, you would say to have more trained nursing staff taking care of the patients in the wards. To have more manpower would mean more expense, to run the hospital, more cost to the patient. The second thing would be to have monitors for every bed in the hospital. Now, that is not a feasible alternative because it would mean, again, you require more space, better infrastructure than what is already there. You will be burdening the system. Then how to get across this problem is to have simpler technology, which is something which can be used in every situation, which is easy to use, which is something which people can interpret. You don't require experts in every situation. Now, these are the things which is something which we have to plan in the future. We have Dozee here, whose basically idea comes from the fact that, initially they thought of picking up patients who are sick at home, and COVID made it that, how to monitor patients who cannot be reached physically, or when it becomes difficult to physically reach those patients, how to monitor them remotely. A lot of things are basically an extension of what was already a part and parcel of what we were doing in critical care. There are various ways of monitoring. One of the ways is to have what Dozee does. Means everything remote, there is nothing attached to the patient, and you are able to pick up anything abnormal, in a much easier way. Now, whether that would work in the hospital setup, that is what, all of us have to see. The second is what we are using in the existing, in scenarios in some of the hospitals, are using those things which are owned by the patient, but which are wirelessly connected to the monitor or to a central monitor where you can pick up any deterioration happening. So we have the technology already. It requires, us to pick up things before, ultimately the beneficiary is the society. It is the patients, the cost to the patient, and, every single thing what we are doing. Today's talks, the panel discussions will be addressing all this. So the first is on with the administrators of the hospital, who have to think about how to adapt newer technologies like this. And of course, the clinicians discussing about how you can utilize the existing technology to, reduce the burden of, patients deteriorating unattended in the wards. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Doctor. Our next talk is on connected health in every bed, a necessity more than a choice. And yes, it will be by Dr. Mudit Dandwate, Mr. Mudit Dandwate, CEO and co-founder from Dozee. Mr. Mudit Dandwate is a co-founder and CEO, which is on a mission to simplify and transform healthcare for millions in India and beyond. Dozee is India's first contactless remote patient monitoring solution that is steadily and systematically pioneering patients monitoring in hospitals and at home. He's a mechanical engineer by education. Mr. Mudit graduated from the IIT Mumbai in 2013. Before starting Dozee, he worked as a vehicle dynamics expert at Altair Technologies. In 2015, he co-founded Dozee with Mr. Gaurav Parchani. Dozee is a contactless remote health monitoring startup that tracks heart health, respiration, heart rate variability, cardiac performance matrix, sleep stages, and apnea-hypopnea index with 98.4% accuracy. Dozee's proprietary AI-based module, Advanced Health Intelligence, detects early signs of health deterioration by continuously assessing users' vital data and conducting a risk analysis to generate alerts from timely clinical interventions. Dozee is present in 250+ hospitals such as Army Hospital, Kilpauk, LNJP, Victoria Hospital, Bangalore, and having monitored about 45,000+ patients so far and saved 1 lakh+ nursing hours. Dozee's AI-based early warning system has generated 1,000+ early health deterioration alerts for timely transfers. Mr. Mudit is recognized as Forbes 30 Under 30 along with multiple others at Dozee like ET Innovation Award, Gold Awards at Medical Mate in India Healthcare Innovation Awards, Anjali Mashilkar Inclusive Innovation Award 2020, Tech Startup of the Year 2019 Award at Association Emerging Digital Technology Summit, NASCOM League of 10 Emerge 50 Awards 2020, Gold Award in the 5th edition of the IHW Council CSR Health Impact Awards in 2021 in the CSR COVID Indigenous Response Project category, and also Aegis Graham Bell Awards 2020. Everybody, please put your hands together for Mr. Dandwate. Over to you, sir.
So thanks a lot for the introduction. You would have, already guessed that I am not used to such a long introduction. That's why I was quite early on the stage. But yeah, and one clarification, I think I'm not doctor. From the introduction, you might have got that. Before this, so I'm a graduate from IIT Mumbai, mechanical engineer, as the MC mentioned. At the same time, before this, I want to quickly touch upon the foundation of Dozee, how this idea even came upon. I was into race cars, and basically we used to work on monitoring health of the vehicle. One thing led to another, and we thought that why not, use this technology that we are using to monitor health of the vehicle? Why not use it to even enhance human health as well? And that's where I convinced Gaurav to leave the job, and we started Dozee in 2015. Went through a rigorous clinical trials, quality certifications, and so on, ensuring that we are making in India, but at the same time, as Dr. Ajai very rightly mentioned, creating enough data, also ensuring enough data points and following all the global standards, right, to ensure that we are creating a world-class product over here. Talking about what we are doing, right, I'll quickly jump upon that, but before that, what is and why even this? When we started, we saw the state in which India was, and again, today as well, it has not changed a lot. We have about 20 lakh beds which are there, and out of that, about 1.25 lakh beds are monitored beds. And all the other 18 lakh 75,000 beds which are out there, both in public and private settings, we have nurses who are, very diligently monitoring these beds out there with manual spot checks. So while this is being done and this is the protocol which is being followed, it has its own limitations, right? Dr. Raghavendra also just spoke about, Dr. Ajai as well, touched upon that subject, that basically the manual spot checks and the way it is happening, right? We have already been proven that with multiple studies which have been conducted as well, that it has its own limitations. The way it is done, it only covers only 2% of the time that patients are, actually in the wards. So we miss a lot of things. The second thing which is out there, which is also well established, that because this checks are happening every 4 to 6 hours, the information is typically little delayed, right? More often than not. And in healthcare, we all know, right? Time is muscle. We all, have that saying, and we know that. And at the same time, the code blue events, which are the escalations which do happen, are pretty common, right? In wards as well, they do happen. And these are completely avoidable, right? If we can catch these things early. That's where, we are talking about why not put connected health in every bed, right? So Dr. Raghavendra also touched upon that subject. In fact, spoke very eloquently on that as well. But when we were doing our assessment, right, that if this is the solution, then what are the barriers out there? And these were, right, 6 barriers that we did find over there. In fact, Dr. Raghavendra also mentioned the cost of it, right? The existing equipment, can we put it on each and every bed? It will just cost a lot of money. At the same time, even operationally as well, it will be quite challenging. It will require a very high amount of operational and training expertise which is out there. So while we are trying to do this to actually ease up the pressure, this might actually increase it. You have to maintain how many electrodes, probes. Every time someone goes to washroom and comes back, again that has to be redone. Now that's a lot of work, right? And can't be done, and therefore it has not been done as well. It also compromises patient experience as well, right? Do you think that a patient who is generally mobile, generally ambulatory, do you want to wrap them around in cuffs and wires just because we want to do monitoring? Answer is no, right? We want them to heal, right? Healthcare starts from heal. So we want them to heal, right, in the most conducive environment which has to be given. And therefore, to whom it is not applicable, we don't try to put monitors on them, right? At the same time, there are few other barriers as well. Ill experience. A lot of alarm fatigue will happen. What if every bed has monitors and it will keep on blinking? Moment heart rate goes up. We know heart rate goes up just about for anything. And if it is muted, then what is the point of it, right? So bedside monitoring itself is not going to solve it. At the same time, if we make it remote, then data security. Is it safe to connect everything remotely and so on, right? That is the question. And last is, of course, integrations with the protocol, with the systems and so on. If the entire system is not integrated together, probably we are creating something which is very hard to handle. And Dr. Ajai also mentioned upon that. Integrations is key to approach this. And that's where we found our solution. I'm going to show you this as well. In fact, it is kept out there and how that thing is. So Dozee is a contactless remote patient monitor and early warning system. The core or the heart of it is actually a thin sensor sheet which is kept below the mattress, which you can see that black thing out there on that. This is elevated, so you might not be able to see, but it is kept under the mattress. It is primarily monitoring the vibrations created in every heartbeat, every respiration cycles, and so on, right? Which we are capturing almost 300 times a second. And then using AI algorithms, we are then dissecting it into different biomarkers. So Gaurav is going to talk in more depth about it, how we actually do that, the science of it. So I'll stick to what exactly it is delivering at the end of it. So it is monitoring parameters like heart rate, respiration, non-contact blood pressure. Now this is something which is very unique to us. In fact, we are world's first company which can do this, non-contact blood pressure over there. At the same time, sleep apnea, and cardiac indices, heart rate variability as well, are the parameters which Dozee is able to capture without even touching the person's body. At the same time, there are certain amount of parameters which do require contact, right? Of course, as much as we want to make it contactless, it may not be technically feasible right away. And that's where we have also created our solution to be extensible, very easily integrable with other easily available, off-the-shelf available accessories as well, which are standardized, FDA cleared, and so on. And that's where it also integrates to SpO2, temperature, ECG, glucometer, and so on as well, right? So that a 360-degree care can be given on the bedside itself and at the same time connected remotely, right? So all of this data is also available remotely on a centralized dashboard, because one bed, as we mentioned, right, bedside monitor is just not going to work. All of this data is available remotely, where from a single screen, a nurse can monitor hundreds of patients. Then the magic comes after that, right? That once the data is generated, now we can actually see the trends of the patient. When the trends are there, the AI can work over there to flag the early signs of deteriorations. It can simply triage patients into different buckets, red zone, orange zone, and green zone, based on the early warning system, which again is very configurable and at the same time integrable to the hospital's protocol as well. And this is what we have seen kind of resonates to the hospital clientele who are already using it in public as well as private setting. In fact, a lot of you whom I see in the crowd today are also, at one level or other, trying it out, seeing it, and some of you are also users of this as well. So this is the forum where we are also looking forward to how to take this a step further and integrate even better with your systems out there. So I am going to actually play, we are going to assume, so this, I wanted actually to give a demo in which we had to make a person lie down on that, and we will show you live vitals and so on as well. A live experience zone is right outside this where we can do that. So what we have done is we have created, assume that there is a virtual human sleeping there on the bed, and how it is going to be happening, right? So we have just done a screen capture of it. The top signal that you see is actually the raw vibration data of the patient. Then using the AI, it is then dissecting it into heart rate signal, respiration signal, SpO2 probe, which can be connected to the finger, is giving you the SpO2 signals as well, and the non-contact blood pressure is giving you the systole and the diastole value continuously as well, right? And all of this data is also available remotely to the clinicians, to the nurses. One button download of the entire report, of the entire overnight reports, and so on, right? So these are all things done so that the workflows are very simple. At the end of it, we actually did some time motion studies, right? In fact, Krishna from Sattva is going to talk about that. In public hospitals, similarly, we are doing it in private as well. We saw that almost 20 to 30% of the time, nurses are spending just in collecting data, digitizing it, and so on, right? While actually, the job is to give better care, right? Job is to give a better bedside care over there, right? So if we could save that time, the care can be improved, and that is what we are trying to do with Dozee. In fact, the other thing that you see on the screen is the entirely configurable alert system out there. Again, something you can experience in the live zone as well, that you can configure alerts for each and every patient out there. At the same time, the early warning system, right? We have worked with quite a lot of you, right? So we do know everyone follows certain different kind of early warning system, right? So even that is also configurable, at the same time integrable to your protocols as well, right? So that is something which we have seen resonates so well, very well. Then coming to it, what is the outcome of that, right? So Dr. Ajai did, talk about, it is not just about creating something, it is also about outcomes, right? Finally, it is about that. ठीक है, अच्छा किया, but क्या किया, right? If we didn't save something, if we didn't reduce something, nothing happened. That's where I'll give you some examples of how hospitals have actually utilized it and improved the patient outcomes also. So first example is actually one of the first installations that we did during COVID times. This is an hospital in Nagpur, IGGMC, where they were under tremendous amount of patient load. This was during the peak COVID time. At that time, they actually upgraded about 150 of their beds with our central monitoring system and the Dozee devices out there. They created a command room where the entire data was being monitored at one screen, and one nurse was monitoring more than 100 patients out there. If there was any kind of red alert, immediately it was being escalated. They were taking care of it by increasing the oxygen therapy, by shifting them to ICUs and so on. They have documented more than 800 successful ICU transfers in 6 months during that time, right? So this was one big outcome that we saw. The other experience that we had of a different kind was actually with Army. The beauty in this was actually we were asked to do this at a very fast pace, at Army pace, actually in 3 days. More than 300 hospital beds had to be upgraded. We did that. And that's where we won accolades from the Army, from Lieutenant General Madhuri Kanetkar ma'am, right, who is the highest ranking women officer. She's retired now. Now she has taken the charge in Maharashtra for public health now. But at that time, she gave us an accolade that, you are the company which works like Army over there, right? And my doctors could sleep today because monitoring and Dozee's eyes are there because it never sleeps. There are more such examples, right? Even, another one that I want to give from private hospitals as well, since I see a lot of you from there. One of the leading hospital chains that we know in the country, Apollo Hospital. they are using this to actually enrich the patient care in their wards. So now, they have implemented Dozee devices in certain beds out there, and patients who are at subcritical or who are acute and, once they're coming out of ICU, they are ensuring that they are on Dozee bed. That's how, they are able to utilize their ICUs much better and so on. So multiple usage, multiple implementations of the technology, but at the same time, what we are very glad about is the fact that what we have created is actually creating positive outcomes, right? And at the end of it, that is what we are looking for. Dr. Raghavendra did speak about our story that, how this technology was first something which was created for home, went to hospital, right? And that's where I had been talking to you about so far. In fact, when we went to hospital, that became our priority. And now we are coming back in home as well, right? Because a lot of patients are at home. At the end of it, patients are in hospitals just for a few days, but at the same time, when they are going back, they are still managing their health, right? How to stay connected with them even when they are at home. Dr. Ajai spoke about they didn't need to come here. How if we could actually provide technology in each one of their home beds as well, right? What if the command center was able to monitor them even while they are at home? What if when the patient comes to actually see the specialist over there, cardiologist, oncologist, and so on, they have the entire data of day-by-day history out there, right? When that happens, I think we could really impact the way healthcare is being delivered as well, and in fact, that is what we are looking for, right? So this is how our home product looks like, which we are again launching in these sectors, in post-operative, geriatrics, cardiac care, and so on. Now, there are few more examples, right? I did talk about something which was more generic, but some very specific cases where we have seen the implementation of technology and implementation of this contactless vitals monitoring technology per se from Dozee. We have seen post-operative patient, I did speak about that, they are at high risk, can be monitored even beyond ICU. This gives them a chance that their ICU times can reduce, this reduces the bills, it lightens up the pocket, and at the same time gives more chances of recovery as well when they are outside. Oncology patients, right? Quite a lot of chemo drugs, and since Ajay sir is also here, so oncology patients, quite a lot of chemo drugs which are out there are toxic, and it compromises immunity of the patient. Going near them to actually collect vitals and so on actually puts them on risk itself. At the same time, there are few drugs which few category of oncology patients as well, like hematology and so on, where patients are actually at higher risk, right? You want to minimize the interactions as much as possible. That's where we have again seen higher usage of this technology. There are immunocompromised patients when patients are going through transplants and so on. So while at home also they can be monitored, even in hospitals as well. You want to minimize interactions. Burn patients, we have seen in Kolkata and so on, they are actually using it on patients where they could not put electrodes on the thoracic region because the skin is not there. How do you do that? And that's where contactless monitoring plays a big part out there. And subacute patients, right? And these are generic who are at high risk, but the list continues. And actually a lot of it is also going to come from the interactions which are going to happen after this. So technology is there, but how to make better use of it as always, you all are the masters of it. And I want to, talk about the barriers which I spoke about, right? A lot of it we actually measure. We see that, a lot of them we have actually been solving. One of them which we have specifically are not covered is data security. I'm sure, all of you will be worried. Moment it is connected, internet enabled, right? Data security is something on top of the mind. And that's where, what we are doing, we are following all the global standards like ISO 27001, 2013, ISO 13485, and so on, that ensures that, the security of data which is there is at the highest level, right? And cannot be compromised at any cost. So that way we are also taking care of every aspect which is out there. So by the end of it, right, so this is my, I'm reaching the finish end of this. What I want to speak about and end on the note is that, technologies are created, technologies come and go. But where we have seen when it becomes and when it actually creates a positive outcomes is when it is embraced, by clinicians, by the healthcare staff, by hospitals, and put into the practice as well, right? And that's exactly what dialogue we wanted to have from a forum like this, and looking forward to this both in the panel discussions as well as interacting with all of you one-on-one as well during the dinner and so on. I think thanks a lot for listening to me so patiently, and really looking forward to the next sessions which are out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mudit. All right, so now we're jumping straight to our first panel discussion for the evening, which is on adoption of automation and AI to enhance clinical outcomes. From detection to prediction and prevention, artificial intelligence has the potential to have an impact on practically every facet of healthcare. Clinical outcomes become one such important aspect of having its impact on the patient, the hospital, and also the community as a whole. Improving patient outcomes means thinking beyond a single aspect and considering the bigger picture of what's important to patients. When it comes to use of technology, healthcare providers and organizations will have to overcome a number of obstacles and address fundamental structural problems, such as data access and the sustainability of algorithms for clinical use. However, healthcare providers have a chance to influence how AI is employed and the results that are attained. Improved patient outcomes go hand in hand with the quality of care, operational efficiencies, and patient satisfaction. To know more about it, we would like to welcome our panelists on stage. Dr. Gurudev, the president of MS Ramaiah Memorial Hospital, with a big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Let's welcome Dr. Gurudev. Dr. Gurudev is the first qualified nephrologist in Mysore. He is responsible for starting nephrology services with a firm footing in Mysore city at JSS, BMH, HMH, and Vikram Hospital. Established satellite dialysis units at Mandya, Markara, and Chamarajnagar. He did the first renal transplant in Mysore in the year 1993, which incidentally is the first transplant done in Karnataka outside of Bangalore city. So far, nearly 300 kidney transplantations have been performed successfully. He is responsible for starting CAPD, continuous ambulating peritoneal dialysis program in Mysore, and about 25 patients are on CAPD in and around Mysore. For the first time, specialized dialysis called continuous renal transplant therapy was started in Mysore at JSS Hospital 17 years ago. Now has established this facility at 3 other major hospitals. He's been invited speakers in various forums such as API, IMA, MPMRT, RSSDI, MERT, and CSI. He has been invited faculty in Southern Chapter of Nephrology, Indian Society of Nephrology, and International Critical Care Conferences. Ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause for Dr. Gurudev for joining us. Thank you, Doctor. Our next panelist for the evening, Mr. Akshay Olity, the Vice President and Business Head, Fortis Hospital, to please join us on stage. Mr. Akshay Olity started his career as a software engineer in the healthcare division of global MNC SAP Labs. He was the development lead for healthcare ERP modules and worked with European hospitals and designed their technology requirements. Post his MBA at IIM Bangalore, Mr. Akshay has juggled through multiple divisions to develop comprehensive know-how in key healthcare verticals. He was the co-architect of India's first HMIS software on cloud. Following this, he designed pan-India SOPs for supply chain and hospital operational efficiencies. Mr. Akshay has handled end-to-end P&L responsibility and steered a turnover of exceeding 120 million. His keen business acumen and timely decisions have catapulted hospitals with performances exceeding all benchmarks. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it up with a round of applause for Mr. Akshay. And he will also be the moderator for the panel discussion. Up next, I'd like to invite on stage Ms. Manisha Kumar, COO of HCG Cancer Hospital, Bangalore. Ms. Manisha Kumar is a management professional with 14 years of experience across senior leaderships, positions driving business growth, strategy and operations, having business expertise in healthcare and healthcare technology. Having strong result orientation, commercial acumen, and ability to manage diverse teams, to innovate solutions and create partnerships. She was felicitated with prestigious awards and recognitions such as Healthcare Personality of the Year 21-22 from Medgate Today, Global Women Leader Award 2022 CMO Asia and World Women Congress, cover issue of Women Entrepreneur Magazine for Exemplary Leadership 2020-21, ranked in Business World's 40 Under 40 list of leaders 2021-22, and also speaker in various global and national forums. Please hear it up, everybody, with a big round of applause for Ms. Manisha Kumar. And our last panelist is Dr. Alexander Thomas, the President, Association of Healthcare Providers, AHPI India, to please join us. Dr. Alexander Thomas, founder, member, and president of the AHPI, founder, member, and president of the Association of National Board Accreditation Institution, founder, president 2012 to 2017, and patron of the Consortium of Accredited Healthcare Society organizations, former director of Bangalore Baptist Hospital, has served the healthcare sector for over 30 years, and he has extensive experience working with Mission Hospital, the second largest healthcare provider after the government. All right, so Mr. Akshay, over to you. Please take over.
A very good evening, and thank you to one and all who are there on the dais today here with me, as well as the members of the audience. A big thank you to CareTech, partnered by Dozee and Deccan Herald and AWS, for hosting all of us and making sure that we have an excellent, wonderful discussion amongst the administrators as well as the clinical members of key hospitals across India. So we'll start today's discussion, and the only reason I was chosen as a moderator for this panel discussion is because I have a background as a software engineer. Then over a period of time, I moved to healthcare, and after enough of sitting with computers, I thought better to spend time with healthcare. But then what I'm realizing over a period of time is that we are going back to technology, right? So that itself is good enough reason why I should be moderating, and we'll see how best we can get the knowledge and the experience from the other panel members in making sure that this discussion becomes very enriching for all of us. So I'd like to start from Professor Gurudev, and we would like to ask the first question to him. Professor Gurudev, is natural intelligence not enough for hospitals? Do we really need artificial intelligence?
Good evening to everyone. At the outset, I was wondering why I was chosen as one of the panelists, because I belong to older generation of physicians, and coincidentally, I'm an administrator since last 1 year. Maybe because I am an administrator, I've been called to be one of the panelists, I suppose. To be frank, I do not have first-hand experience of AI in medicine. The only connect I have is my nephew works very closely in Microsoft, designing a lot of AI in medical field. So he keeps bringing to me a lot of advances, that especially the HoloLens that has been used for virtual assistant of surgeries. There, I've seen when a surgeon is performing in some hospital, virtually some other surgeon from somewhere else is actually sitting on the chest of the patient and guiding the surgeon how it is, it can be done, and he's helping him how to do it. So these are few informations I have collected from him while we just have casual discussion. Your question is that why do we need AI? See, the AI, what I have, rather let me be very frank, what I have understood by reading literature is, it helps us to, there are two perspectives. One is a predictive value, other one is prescriptive value. Predictive value is that when you feed a lot of data, I don't know how many of you are aware that the first AI thing that we see is in our ECGs. Long back, thousands of ECGs with reports were fed into the machine, and that started giving us printed information. But I'm sure most of the clinicians do not agree what comes on that printed material, because it was not a single person who interpreted the ECGs. The multiple people interpreted, so each one had a different way of interpreting those ECGs. So that's why we get varying types of reports. But now, since it is getting more standardized, the input is being given by a single source, so there is more of predictability. So when the data is collected, when there is a past data of a patient is there, we can predict what is going to be the outcome. And then comes the prescriptive way. Then we can actually generate what is the best care that can be given to a patient. This is where the AI comes into picture.
Thank you, Professor. We'll go to Dr. Manisha here. One very important thing that we wanted to understand also is, what is the importance of AI? How does AI help, and how does new technology help in modern healthcare?
Thank you, Akshay. I also happen to be an engineer, similar background. I'm not a doctor. Small correction. So, how I look at it is, technology in healthcare has been there for some time, probably over a decade, but the adoption of technology, both by doctors, by providers, by doctors, as well as by patients, was far less than anticipated. And the real disruption that came was when we were hit by the pandemic, by COVID. That is when, within a matter of not even days, matter of hours at times, we had to come up with ways of solving problems of capacity, solving problems of shortage of manpower, largely clinical manpower, shortage of infrastructure, both medical and physical infrastructure, and so on, because we were looking at the daunting task of managing unprecedentedly large deluge of patients and handling a virus which we knew very little or nothing about. And that is when all of us quickly turned to technology, which was already there. So there was no innovation that took place. It was pretty much adoption. And like a quick fix, it helped us, and it also served as a great proof of concept, both for our doctors as well as patients. There are so many studies now that say that 75% of patients who use telemedicine during COVID, or let us say virtual consultations, still want to continue, are happy to continue with virtual consultations because they've seen the benefit of it. So I think when COVID came, we used a lot of technology in managing patients outside, because the limiting parameters for us were beds, were critical equipment, were nurses and doctors. And we used a lot of remote monitoring devices. Coming to the topic at hand, a lot of remote monitoring, vital monitoring, which happened for patients who were in home quarantine care. I led multi-speciality hospitals back then, and we were managing a volume which was 4 times our overall capacity of the hospital. And we managed 3 times of our capacity in homes of patients, looking after them in home quarantine care. And while in hospital also, of course, we fell short of critical beds. We fell short of ICU, HDU beds, and we used EICUs, tele-ICUs, step-down facility, where with the same number of doctors and nurses, we were able to manage large number of patients. So that's really I would say, the tipping point in the entire journey that technology has had in the healthcare ecosystem. And now we are realizing that the entire outpatient ecosystem in a hospital can pretty much be taken out of the hospital, because what is a critical resource for us beyond the point of time when we hit our capacities, we hit the capacity roadblock? The critical resource for us becomes our clinical manpower and our infrastructure. And we would like to then use it to the best capacity to treat the most critical patients that have no alternative but to come to the hospital. And that is also more financially viable for us. And therefore, we want to now look at technology as a means to provide a single digital front door to patients, which then at the back end captures the entire outpatient ecosystem and whatever services out of hospital that can be given. So that definitely is one journey that we have undertaken, that I know many hospitals, I'm sure Fortis has undertaken as well. And secondly, AI, I think Dr. Ajai shared a lot of insights on that. We are using it for a lot of predictive modeling for treatment of our cancer patients, for diagnostics. And we are working with some of the largest medtech providers and companies of the world in developing this through integrated research. So there's a lot of work in that area as well.
Thank you, Ms. Manisha. That was very insightful. Now I move on to Dr. Alexander Thomas, and the way AIS or new technologies have penetrated into healthcare, already it seems that you cannot separate one from the other. So can you throw a little bit of light on how do you foresee AI being used across healthcare? What are the various touch points and how do we see healthcare in the future?
Thank you. I represent 20,000 hospitals all over the country through AHPI, and I take every opportunity to promote the use of technology. That's why I'm here. I will actually go back a little bit and answer your first question from my perspective. Why artificial intelligence? AHPI believes that anything that can improve affordable quality healthcare should be used, and I think there's no second thought that technology is definitely, artificial intelligence technology is helping. So I think it's important. Also want to add a comment that it wasn't an easy jump from non-technology to technology. And every cloud has a silver lining, and we must thank COVID for a lot of things. I don't know whether anybody is here from the government. Commissioner was supposed to be here. But the government was not very encouraging of using technology. I remember one day before the lockdown, I was part of the vision group, government of Karnataka, with Devi and a few others. And our deputy CM was in charge of the health. And we took a decision. I think the whole country, the state government, the center were very resistant about using, allowing telemedicine, if you remember. I think we shouldn't forget that COVID helped us, because the next day COVID lockdown came, and within a few weeks the government of India and the government, state governments allowed this. So I think it's been a journey, and I always think that God is in charge. And I think with COVID we have leapfrogged quite a bit. If you look at 2 years ago and now, we are using technology, and I think the other important thing is outcomes. When I say affordable quality, I'm also talking about outcomes. Technology and artificial intelligence definitely helps improve outcomes, improve quality. So I think we should not hesitate in using it, but don't let it control us. Now I won't go into details about where we can use it. Enormous, there's a huge, and maybe just since I've made a few notes, I'm an orthopedic surgeon and not a technology guy, so I had to do some reading up. And HPI does work in technology. We have a technology committee which is looking at various things. In fact, now we are actually looking at 2 or 3 cloud-based ICUs, so that even in Tier 2 to Tier 3 cities, they will have the luxury of having intensive care units, which is actually a few years ago was simply not possible. A sick patient had to be brought into town. So I think just very quickly, things, especially to India, I think artificial intelligence, automation allow us to expand access to care. Access to care is so very important. It reduces, this is from the physician point of view, from the nursing point of view, it reduces the burden of electronic health records, and also uses the electronic health record into a reliable risk predictor. Ajay was talking about, Ajay gave a phenomenal speech. I think he touched on all the points. Using the data, validated data into a risk predictor, using the smartphones. I won't go into too much detail. I think just one thing that I thought I'll talk to you about is, we talk about taking biopsies, and that is the basis of a lot of our decisions. But I think very probably in a year or two, I don't know how rapidly it's going to develop, but there is now a system where using the next generation of radiology tools, they can actually they may replace the need for tissue samples. And for people of my generation and probably Gurudev's generation, just something awesome, where without taking out a tissue physically, you can make a tissue diagnosis. So these are some of the fantastic things that are not in the realm of something that you're dreaming about, something that can happen very soon. It can help in antibiotic resistance. Ajay spoke about immunotherapy for cancer center, and a lot of other things. So I'll stop with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Alexander. And I think with the answers in the first three questions, I think it's very clear that healthcare and tech will have to go together. It's already happened, and there is a lot more integration that is likely to happen. So we are at least in the right place. That is something that we have confirmed. But then again, it will not be a smooth ride. That is something that we all know for sure, especially as hospital leadership. Most of us who are present here in this event are very much aware of the challenges that we have to go through. So let us start with Ms. Manisha. What, according to you, are the challenges and the potential obstacles when it comes to deployment, implementation of new technology, AI in a healthcare ecosystem?
Yeah, very relevant question, especially from provider point of view, because whenever we look at implementing anything new, there's really two things that we keep in mind. One is how easy is the change management for us? How easy will it be for us to train our people? What would be the efficacy once they implement it? And the second, of course, is financial viability. Yeah, so I'll first talk about these two because from a provider perspective, these are most important. I think in terms of change management, a challenge that I've seen, and a lot of technology enablements we have implemented, a lot of companies have approached us with very intelligent, smart solutions. But the user interface really has to be something that's very optimal, that is the most conducive and most convenient for the doctors and as well as the nursing and any other paramedic staff to use. It should require minimal time, and then should be flexible and scalable enough to seamlessly integrate with the hospital information system. And that is where I think either one or the other of these two is where a lot of technology innovations and enablements that are coming don't quite meet the mark that we expect. Of course, there's data privacy, data security. I think a lot has been said on that. There are a lot of guidelines which are there. There is HL7, HIPAA, but very few companies are able to adhere to those because, as I understand from it, wearing the technology hat, some of it comes in the way of fluidity of data. So easily integrating the principles of what is the product that we are making, and one is making, and then making it flexible, scalable, and then also adhering to these guidelines becomes a little bit of a complicated task. So I think that from technology, startups point of view as well. And I think lastly, cost, and who's going to bear the burden of the cost. And that is where I think before COVID, when everybody was trying to enter the hospital market, that was a question that we put forward to every company. And there were various answers. The payers are not ready to take the brunt of it. Insurers will not reimburse it. Patients may not see the value and they might find it expensive. We can lose them. Why should the hospital take the cost of it? And I think the smartest solution is one that pays for itself. We all discussed, right in the last 10 minutes that there are so many solutions we implemented during COVID. And even if we took the cost of, one-time cost of setting up, say, some devices and then a monthly or per patient running cost, but if we were able to take that many more patients with the same infra and same people, in the short term itself, it more than made for itself. So a very good cost-benefit analysis. And of course, there's a long-term use case also, which smarter organizations who are more aware of what is the importance of data are realizing that all these devices, if they have robust patient healthcare record systems that integrate with our HISs, there is this huge data mine that we can have at our disposal that can be analyzed, crystallized. They're saying data is the new oil. So it's all going to be data going forward in future, whether it's research, whether it's to come up with new business propositions. So that's, of course, the long-term use case. And really solutions that can have a good mix of both are the ones that will see quick adoption right now.
Thank you for the comprehensive answer. And like they say, the best solutions are always simple. And as long as any solution that covers all these aspects that Ms. Manisha explained, I think it will be a success within the hospitals.
I move over to Dr. Alexander. How would we balance the stakeholders, the internal stakeholders? You are rightly poised as somebody who has seen the internal stakeholders as well as the external stakeholders from AHPI. So how would we work with all the stakeholders to make sure such a project is a success, and what are the key things that we need to keep in mind?
See, I think we've been talking about artificial intelligence, etc., and I think I agree with Manisha saying that whatever solution you do has to be sustainable and affordable. So I think artificial intelligence and technology, I think it's very easy to prove that when you introduce this, outcomes are better, hospital stay is less, you need less staff. So if you actually present it properly, I think that's not going to be an issue. People will accept it. The only issue is how reliable is it, and then I think you touched upon various other subjects. So now, what about the stakeholders? I think the biggest, we are talking at a very high level, but if you ask me today, the healthcare workers, the medical professionals in the country know very, very little about technology, about artificial intelligence. And that is a big challenge, because unless they are aware of it, we are not going to progress much. That is the single biggest challenge. And again, AHPI is an organization which believes in doing something. So after doing a survey across all the country, we actually introduced a course on technology for medical professionals. We started just before COVID. It's a purely online course. And so the partners are the Public Health Foundation of India along with IHPI. Then we have ISRO and the Indian Institute of Science. So I think that is where we need to start. I think this is at a different level, but we need to educate our nurses, our doctors, our administrators to see the huge potential that technology has. If you don't intervene at that level also, you will find a challenge. We have just, HPI is also in the process of empowering medical professionals. We, unfortunately, especially in our country, we medical professionals are so engrossed in a profession that we don't look at other areas. So that's the reason that we are in a sort of, things are in a sorry state. We get beaten up after working so hard, after so many of our colleagues die, because of lack of communication. HPI has ensured that communication is now in the medical curriculum. It took us a long time. We wrote a book on it. We started actually a communication movement. We don't know nothing about the law. I remember when I passed out and I got a lawyer's notice, I didn't sleep for 3 days. So we have tied up with the National Law School of India University. They're running courses for the medical people, including administrators. And very recently, we have a think tank on health based at the National Law School of India University. We have come out with a book along with the Law School of India University telling doctors and nurses and others what to do, what you should know about, don't get phased, etc. We have now come out with a book on technology for medical professionals. We've just handed it over to the publishers. It'll probably be out in a few months. Important thing about that is that it will be available as a free download for all our medical professionals. So in my view, I think that is also a significant problem. We need to address that.
Thank you, Dr. Alexander. That was as clear as it can be. And thanks for all the good work that HPI is doing in this regard. Now I move over to Professor Gurudev. If you could throw some light on us on how a large ecosystem like MS Ramaiah, when we have to introduce path-breaking changes into a large ecosystem, obviously it is not just going to be one single meeting that is going to get a new initiative implemented across. So for large systems which are functioning with multiple moving parts, what are the challenges that you would face and how would you probably overcome them?
See, any change, we know there is a lot of resistance. And I would like to tell that technology or AI, they are not replacement for any of our professional competency. They can only be assistants or they can complement. So we have to keep this in mind. Though I am a senior citizen or also I graduated long back compared to many people here. I have been one of those who adopted technology much earlier than the younger generations. So we need to educate the people, the advantage of technology. Like I am trying to bring in a lot of technology into our institution. There seems to be a lot of resistance because people have gotten used to be doing the same thing what they've been, even to start off with paperless documentation. And even the EMR that we had to do it in the outpatient. There are plus and the negatives about it. For example, if I am looking down and typing and talking to a patient, we are not making eye contact with the patients. So we are losing that earlier days where doctors not only spoke about their, from where they came, talked about their families, then came to what their problems are. Now we are all getting hooked on to the technology, like we just looking down and not even looking at the patient. We have had a lot of complaints, like when we get the feedback. Your technology has lost the connect between the patient and the doctors. But as a head of an organization, we realize that there is a great deal of technology we have to adopt. And for that, we need to educate everybody. In fact, I've been suggesting for all the medical students in our college and even the postgraduates, when they get into that, they have to compulsorily go through certain training, especially using the hospital information system. And they need to know how, not only the medical aspect, how a store works, how our CSSD works, all these things. I mean, there is a lot of technology involved there. So all these things have to come into the picture, and we need to educate just not the doctors, the nurses, the technicians. And it is as you said, it can't be just said over a 15 minutes panel discussion. It requires a lot of group discussions. Take everybody into confidence first. There is a scare among the doctors that when we bring in technology, that are they going to be replaced with technology? No, actually, it adds a lot of responsibility. It adds a lot of accountability. There is a group of people who are scared of accountability. So we have to get educated. Administrators, the people who bring in technology have to get educated, then others.
Thank you, Professor. And you've just stated all the facts that we all face on a day-to-day basis, and this is a constant work in progress. It is not something that starts at 9 o'clock and ends at 5 p.m. every day. It is something that is 24/7, 365 for healthcare administrators to manage change over a period of time. Very well said. Thank you for that. And my next question would be to Dr. Alexander. What would be your advice for startups as well as hospitals when it comes to care tech? How would you want it to happen so that it is as quick as possible, as smooth as possible? What guidance would you give them?
I think I'll go into an area which none of us have really spoken about, and I think very relevant for startups as well as for hospitals and all the people who use it. That is artificial intelligence, technology, automation related to ethics. I think it's a very important question, and I think that is something that everybody has to keep in mind. As Gurudev said, artificial intelligence should not. There is a possibility that artificial intelligence can take over. I mean, that's one of the risks. So we have to ensure that artificial intelligence only facilitates the human touch. I think that's very important. We shouldn't allow it. So the 4 points, again, as I said, I'm an orthopedic surgeon and I've had to do some research, but I think it's very important. And coming from a mission background and being on the ethics committee at the state level, I think I focused on this. So I think when you're doing a startup or any stakeholder, the most important person in our ecosystem, I think we tend to forget it. And in Baptist, when I was there, this was always the patient is the most important person in our ecosystem. And I'm sure everybody sitting in this room, everybody sitting in a hospital is there because of the patient, and we should not forget it. Whatever we do should be in the best interest of the patient, and I think we need to again and again need to reinforce that. And again, I'm a little diverging, but you know the recent, there's been a huge increase in violence against doctors. We have lost 3,000 of our colleagues, but still the public think that doctors, nurses, they are villains. So We have just written a book on prevention of violence against doctors, and one of the things is communication. One of the things is for us to remember is keep the patient first. You must excuse me for keeping on repeating that, but I think for all of us it's very important. So I think one is we need to keep that in mind. When you're talking about AI, about technology, etc., we have to keep in mind that we have to get informed consent to use the data. People have spoken about it, but I think it's an important issue. Safety and transparency. When you talk about safety, make sure that the machine doesn't control you, that you also utilize them. And of course, transparency is key in everything we do. And this algorithms that are actually developed, and this is for startups, they should be fair and they should actually be uniform, should not cover only one aspect of the population. And again, I think data privacy is important. Now, we had a very interesting conversation outside just before I came in, and I think this is something we all need to keep in mind. If something goes wrong, now look at this system that you have outside. If something goes wrong, who is responsible? So the first reaction was, it's a nurse. We said, not the nurse. It starts with the person who is responsible for the software, etc. So I think what we need to remember is that our legal framework needs to change a little bit, because I think it's important that we now start putting accountability at every stage, because finally we have to answer the patient. So I think that is something that we need to keep in mind. Whether you like it or not, artificial intelligence is going to be used more and more in healthcare, and we just have to be mindful that it's a good balance between artificial intelligence, between the human touch and compassion, so ultimately that the patient gets the best benefit of all this.
Thank you, Dr. Alexander. And ethics is one of the key parts that often gets neglected in this entire journey, and that is something that should not be kept aside, and that should be the top of mind focus, and well said to that point. Over to Ms. Manisha. Wanted to understand from you, let us say there are 10 softwares in front of you that you need to pick. You need to pick only one, and all of them serve the same purpose. How would you decide which one to go ahead with, and what will be the criteria based on which a hospital will decide this is better than the rest?
So I think the first and the most important, I touched upon some of these when I spoke last, but the first and most important for us to decide to adopt a new technology is going to be the user interface, and what is really going to be the screen like in front of our doctors or nurses or paramedics. How much time will it take for them to use it? See, one of the useful advantages of using connected technology, remote monitoring, etc., is that it saves times for nurses, right? It's taking that time that they spend in a mundane activity of taking vitals, entering that data on a piece of paper or in a hospital information system. That time gets released so that a nurse can focus more on core caregiving activities while a machine takes care of it. And it also reduces the margin of error that a human intervention might leave some room for, and machine is doing it seamlessly, so therefore there wouldn't be any errors. So this is something that which is the most pivotal criteria for adopting new technologies, how judicious it makes healthcare givers work. Is it increasing their efficiency? Is it saving time for them? Is it easy for use? And how difficult or easy is it going to be for us to train them to do change management? That is, of course, number one. Second, of course, is, and corporate hospitals like us, we have some advantage, but really if we look at Indian landscape, a lot of hospitals don't have very good IT infrastructure. And that is the reality. And on top of that, we are using bandwidth intensive devices that are putting more loads, training the system as it is. A lot of hospitals have connectivity issues time and again. So whatever solution has to be there has to be light and easy, and should not be very bandwidth intensive, and should be able to fit easily on top of the infrastructure that is available. And that's the kind of flexibility that technology innovators have to think of, because in Indian scenario, we're not like the US where we have a very good backup of infrastructure. It's more or less alike across hospitals. Most of the healthcare is private healthcare, so it really depends on how deep the pockets of the trust or of the owner. So that is important. And third, of course, is financial viability, which I spoke about before, is how easy is it for us to do a cost-benefit analysis? How soon do we think we can recover the cost? Are we ready to bear the brunt of the cost? Because it helps release our manpower time, it helps us get more patients and so on. And lastly, I think is how well are these software or technology innovations managing patient health records. I mean, how rigorous they are with the data security, privacy, but also how thoroughly and how seamlessly they are able to integrate it to our systems. How easy are they making it for the patient to get it at the end point? Because the way forward really for technology in healthcare has to be interoperability. I think Dr. Ajai was trying to talk about it in the end, that we all have to work together, and therefore what it means for the patient is they could go to any hospital, any network of hospitals, anywhere in the country, in any environment, and be able to get their data, their reports, their discharge summaries, whatever, in a seamless manner, which is interpretable in that provider space. So interoperability is what will really pave the way for sustainable healthcare innovation, technology innovation in healthcare. And that has to be at the backdrop of designing any software solution.
Thank you, Ms. Manisha. Again, a comprehensive answer that explains in full clarity what are the key things that startups need to keep in mind. And this is something that we have seen that the software development happens in their own software labs. And me as a software engineer, I've also seen that as long as the development happens, if it happens inside a closed room without interaction with the healthcare stakeholders, it ends up not being fruitful. So as much as possible, the design, the development, the piloting, all of that, if it happens in healthcare ecosystems, like how Dozee does very effectively, the chances of success are very high, and we'd like to reiterate that. We would just like to close this panel discussion, but with the final thoughts from all our members. We'll start from Professor Gurudev. Your thoughts on how healthcare, technology, and AI can coexist together, and how do you see the future of healthcare?
It's inevitable that we have to coexist, because technology is, as I said, it is going to complement, especially the AI is going to help, because we have seen a lot of studies or literature available. What a human eye missed, the AI is picking up, especially in cancer detection, and also in radiology and histopathology. I think it's over a period of time, the AI is going to take over the human factor. So we have no option other than to coexist and make the best use of the technology and the AI. If we don't believe and trust in that, actually we have to develop a trust with AI. The most important thing, doctors, physicians have to develop a trust. Once that trust is developed, I think our life is going to be much easier, and it's going to be a great boon for the care of the patients.
Thank you, well said. Ms. Manisha, the same question, your final thoughts.
So I think in sum and substance, technology has to add value to every key stakeholder, and the value has to be very tangible. If we talk about radiology, a smart AI-enabled radiology information system in an oncology environment can actually auto-contour a tumor, which a radiologist today sits and does, and therefore save the time that a radiologist spends in contouring and doing those basic activities, and can save that time, auto-contour, and then the radiologist still is required because he will go through the report, validate it with the clinically correlated and so on. So it has to add value at the doctors, the practitioners, and definitely has to add tangible value for the patient and the provider, and also keep patient at the focal point, like what Dr. Alexander said. It's very important that we know that the data actually belongs to the patient. It's important to keep that ethical fiber and ethical ground that keep patient at the heart of whatever solution is being designed. And I think real value add in our system today is in tier 2, tier 3 cities. We have a lot of hospitals in tier 2, 3 cities, and we try to, as far as possible, do a hub and spoke model internally and try to do integrative, multidisciplinary care delivery for patients as far as possible. But that's really where the gap is. And I think that is where we all need technology to come in more and more so that we can cater to that larger set of patients.
Thank you, Ms. Manisha. Dr. Alexander, your final thought.
Yeah, I'd probably say, may not use the word trust artificial intelligence. We shouldn't trust, we should always be in control, otherwise it'll eat you up. My parting comment is, I think there are some very big minds in technology are here, technology people who are interested in health. My suggestion to you is, we'll take off at a tangent, can you focus on wellness rather than this? This is important, but I think it's also important that you use technology for prevention and wellness. And I'll refer to what Ajay said. I also work in a campaign against tobacco. And we're talking about at a different level and a basic problem. We know tobacco kills so many people, it causes so many things, but we are unable to prevent its growth. So my suggestion, my request to all the technology guys here, focus on health. And there's some way you can create some technology where we'll get rid of smoking and get rid of tobacco.
Thank you. I'm sure every person, even the smokers, would agree with that, they're not going towards the right direction when it comes to health. And with that, we come to an end of the panel discussion. Thank you very much, all the panel members. And with my parting thought as well, as long as we keep the patient in mind, the patient as the central point of focus, technology is in healthcare is natural evolution. It will happen, it has to happen, and it will be for the good as long as the priorities are all on the patient. So thank you very much, everyone. It was a great learning for all of us, and we'll move forward.
Thank you, Dr. Gurudev. Thank you, Ms. Manisha, and thank you, Dr. Alexander, for the amazing discussion. And thank you, Mr. Akshay, for moderating this session wonderfully. Everybody, let's hear it up with a big round of applause. Thank you very much once again. Our next talk is on connected health becoming reality and the challenges and opportunities with that. And the session will be by Mr. Krishna, the CEO of Sattva Consulting. Mr. Krishna is a co-founder and CEO at Sattva and is responsible for the overall strategic direction, growth and impact of the organization. Over the last decade, Mr. Krishna has been working with the leadership of global foundations, social organizations and corporates to design and scale their social impact initiatives across India, Southeast Asia, Africa and Europe. Mr. Krishna led many collective impact initiatives across different themes like water, education and livelihood. He started his career as an early member of Dell R&D in India and was the founding partner of Longhouse Consulting, a boutique executive search firm focused on technology and emerging sectors in India. Mr. Krishna is an alumnus of BITS Pilani and serves on the advisory board of multiple social impact and technology startups. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and let's welcome Mr. Krishna on stage.
Hi, good evening everyone, and I think after a whole bunch of doctors and engineers, I think it's time for an MBA also to kind of come up on stage and share some of our thoughts. So we are well represented. As the slides come up, I think it was a wonderful panel discussion. Thanks for that, and all the discussion since morning, which I think very strongly underlines some of the work that we saw Dozee do. So I'm going to talk today a little bit about the report that you have in front of you and the video that you saw and some of the data that we've collected, but also how that kind of relates to what we see at Sattva that's happening at the overall healthcare ecosystem level, from an India perspective. So we looked at across the board multiple types of data as we did the study for Dozee. For me, what was very interesting, and I think the last part of Dr. Alexander's comment on the impact on society when AI and technology kind of come into various sectors, for me, what is very heartening is to see an organization or a company like Dozee, looking at impact measurement so early in their, evolution, because impact measurement is typically something that people keep for later. Let's go ahead and, build an organization or a business and let's look at impact later. But I think Dozee, right at the beginning, thinking about measuring what impact their technology is having, not just the output or the outcomes, but actually going even further and looking at impact. And I think all the panelists, you heard them talk about impact and outcomes from the perspective of various stakeholders, the sustainability of the technology, the cost angle, and at the end of it, the impact on patient. I think what Dozee gave us as Sattva an opportunity is to study all of this in our first study with them. And we're very happy to present some of these findings with you. And it's also very, heartening and, again, very, very inspired by what Dozee is doing, that they got a third party to come and do it. Somebody who's looking at, somebody like us, who's looking at social impact as our core objective, to come and look at the study and look at it from a third party lens. Again, something that we've very rarely seen, startups do at this early stage of their evolution. So, congratulations to Dozee for that, kind of leadership. We are, quick introduction, we are one of the leading, impact consulting firms in India and in the region in Asia, focused very strongly on healthcare as well. Thanks to COVID, healthcare has now become one of the larger pieces of work that we do across the country. And we were very, very happy to partner with Dozee on this particular study. What we looked at from a sample point of view was actually multiple hospitals, and these were spread across the country. So when we are talking about some of the data that's coming in, it's coming from different parts of the country, from different stakeholders, and everybody talked about the value. I think Ms. Manisha especially talked about the value to patients and to the stakeholders internally. This gets with the kind of the divide that exists in rural India, and especially when we start going to places like the aspirational districts, the impact and the social ROI that exists, is significant when the use of technology comes. So we looked at hospitals which were in the public space across the country, multiple stakeholders, within these hospitals to bring the study to, all of you today. The first thing, for us is really, everybody talked about the behavior change aspect. One is you can push technology, the other is how do you kind of create a pull from a technology aspect. And I think what we found extremely encouraging, from a Dozee perspective, was how easy it was to kind of get it into the system. The amount of time it took to train somebody, and also how quickly, and I think, even when Mudit kind of demonstrated it to you all, how simple it was. And I think that was another thing that the panel talked about quite a bit, is the technology simple enough? There might be a very lot of complicated stuff happening in the back end, but the front end and the usability being very simple, I think was very well demonstrated by the data that you see, on the screen right now. The next thing was, for us, the nurses being, such an important stakeholder in especially the kind of healthcare system India is, we saw significant acceptance from the nursing ecosystem. You'll see, from the perspective of both time saved to the ease, and whether they wanted to kind of use this for multiple of the beds that they had access to, all of those got on average over 90%, acceptance rate. So for us, what this really tells us is both the adoption and the use, the change management, the behavior management, I think is quite well supported when you simplify technology, which I think Dozee is able to, kind of do. The next thing, in terms of time saved, and I've, I think as patients, we've all kind of experienced this, that it's really, the number of visits. I mean, as a patient, I've always waited for when the doctor or the nurse will show up next, because that's when I will know how I am doing, I had this unfortunate experience during the second wave of COVID, where I was really waiting, for the nurse or the doctor to kind of come up and tell me how I was doing and what was going on. So the amount of time spent, in engaging with the patient, just in terms of measurement of or monitoring of the vitals and other things, and even giving that little bit of a comfort to the patient. I think this again gives you a data about how much of the time is getting saved by the technology, for the nurses, and that significantly improves both productivity, and also in terms of the well-being of the stakeholder in question here. This was another very interesting thing that we found, that the number of alerts, again, because of it's a continuous monitoring system, anything that's monitored more continuously, you have much better output and outcome. So the technology was able to throw out a lot better set of alerts, which was giving, again, a lot more focused attention to the right issue, which also led to much better care. And that's where our estimate of how much lives could be saved per every 100 beds of Dozee, that's where it comes from. And that's another very important feature that we found on why this technology was relevant, both from a patient, and from the nurse perspective. We also looked at, from a hospital management, if you look at it as a stakeholder, right? We talked about the nurses and the patients, that the amount of the throughput of the hospital itself kind of increases, because number of, bringing down 1.3 days in the ICU significantly creates better throughput, and this helps actually serve more patients. And when you look at tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities, this becomes a much stronger impact on the local ecosystem, and how, public healthcare can benefit from better throughput if you're able to kind of do this in a much more effective kind of a manner. We've also kind of went on to say, because there was also talk of financial, impact, I think that was another important element that had to be discussed. What was the kind of savings, both to patients, to the hospitals and the other stakeholders? Our estimate is that, for every 100 Dozee beds out there, close to about 2.7 crores can be saved, annually. And this, when you look at it from an India perspective, is a significantly, large number that can be put to better use, as we go forward. So when we look at, healthcare, even at Sattva, for us, measurement is very, very important, because technology, while creates a very a strong value proposition, but technology used in the right way can create better societal output as well. And if you can use all the data that we presented, and this is just one of the first studies, and we really hope that Dozee continues on the study of measurement on especially the impact that they're having on all the stakeholders and on society, then you're able to use this learning and data to also improve the system, not just prove that there is impact happening, but you can also look at improving the system using this kind of study and the kind of data coming from it. Finally, I think there was a lot of talk about how do we go from serving the ecosystem in the urban areas to more rural areas. I think the adoption by the public health ecosystem is a very important aspect. And the public healthcare system is really about impact and impacting the lives of some of these vulnerable communities out there, especially, like I said, aspirational districts where 21% of India resides today. And taking technologies like this and able to manage this remotely, I think has a big, impact. And I want to congratulate, Dozee and the entire team of Dozee for the technology, but also being, kind of brave enough to keep measurement as an important focus and using and publicly putting out, a report like this. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and good luck to Team Dozee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Krishna. Right now, we'll be moving on with the second panel discussion. adoption of early warning system in non-ICU setup for enhanced patient safety. Abnormal vital signs often appears before serious adverse outcomes, including cardiac respiratory arrest and death. This calls for a systematic track and trigger strategy for early detection of clinical deterioration of patients and reaction to minute changes in a patient's condition. Early warning systems fill in the gap by tracking all the vitals and cumulatively calculating the risk of each patient's deterioration. With each progressively higher score, early warning systems use temperature, blood pressure, pulse, heart rate, respiration rate, and degree of consciousness to initiate an action for early intervention. Monitoring beyond ICU settings is not a routine norm today. Currently, the only patients in the hospital who are continuously monitored are the patients in the telemetry and intensive care units and those in the operating room. Patients outside these setups are routinely monitored by spot checks, which are done every 4 to 6 hours, leaving the patient unmonitored for about 90 to 95% of the time. 4.2 million deaths occur globally each year due to post-operative complications, and this highlights a huge gap in the healthcare system in terms of continuous monitoring beyond ICU settings for timely intervention. I'd like to invite our panelists on stage. And firstly, our moderator for this session, Dr. Pradeep Rangappa, to please join us on stage. Ladies and gentlemen, with a huge round of applause. Dr. Pradeep Rangappa is the Chief Consultant, Intensive Care, Manipal Hospital, Yashwantpur. He has about 25 years of experience. His interest lies in medical philately and medical numismatics. He believes in training and providing lectures to the budding trainees, healthcare practitioners, nurses, and paramedical staff delivering care in intensive care. Up next, we'd like to invite Dr. Murli Chakravarti, Director Anesthesiology, Fortis Hospital, to join us. Dr. Murli Chakravarti has with him an experience of over 34 years. More than 3 decades ago, he has established the Department of Anesthesia, Critical Care and Pain Relief at the Fortis Hospitals. He is an authority on various aspects of hospitals-associated infections. He has obtained his medical and postgraduate degree from the University of Mysore during the mid-80s. And he's been a prolific speaker at national and international meetings and is an honorable author of more than 160 scientific papers. He was also part of the team that performed the first awake beating heart surgery and off-pump awake surgery at Fortis Hospitals, Bangalore. Dr. Murli Chakravarti's area of special interest are: he's identified as the authority on use of epidural in cardiac surgery. His publication is perhaps the biggest one globally and has several publications in hospital-associated infection control. Let's hear it up with a round of applause for Dr. Murli. Up next, can we have Dr. Jagdish Chandra, Senior Consultant, Internal Medicine, Sagar Hospitals, to please join us. Dr. Jagdish Chandra, famously known as Dr. JC, initiated his medical career with an MBBS degree from the JJM Medical College, Davangere in the year 1988. And then he specialized in internal medicine with an MD qualification from the same institution in the year 1991. His career of about 28 years spans as a consultant physician at various eminent hospitals. Currently, he is associated with Saga Hospitals from the last 20 years. Please hear it up with a round of applause for Dr. Jagdish. The next panelist, Dr. Ullas Gopikrishnan, Head of Critical Care and Emergency Medical Medicine, Sparsh Hospitals. Everybody please hear it up for Dr. Ullas Gopikrishnan. And he's graduated from the Bangalore Medical College in the year 1996. He finished his postgraduate from St. G.S. Medical College and King Edward Memorial Hospital, Mumbai. And after working as a teaching faculty, he moved to UK for further training in anesthesiology and intensive care medicine in Leicester. He got his European diploma in intensive care in the year 2007, and Dr. Ullas returned to India in the year 2005, and he's been practicing anesthesia since his return to India. And welcome, Doctor. And Dr. Pradeep, over to you now.
So good evening, everyone. So thanks, Deccan Herald and CareTech for having us here. So just to give a bit of background, I represent intensive care. I was the national vice president. So today here we are talking about technology, but in intensive care as a specialty, technology is something not very new for us. And as we have been speaking about COVID, which has really thrown open the doors for us to incorporate technology. So I wish to applaud our Karnataka government, which really came at the forefront during the COVID, in the time of crisis. So we had a great public-private partnership during COVID where we incorporated tele-ICU at the outset. In fact, we have to really salute our government because this was the first state which incorporated tele-ICU at a state level to deliver care to around 28 districts. And as Manipal Hospital, and I was part of Columbia then, so we were overseeing around 28 districts in the state. And in fact, we are all proud to say that our case fatality rate during the second wave amongst all the urban cities was the lowest in our city and in the state as well, because we were constantly, I was part of the COVID task force, we were constantly looking at the CFRs at that point of time. And this model was presented to Union government at that point of time, Ms. Aarti Ahuja, who had come, and this was even uploaded then. So what it goes to show is a simple partnership of that nature and with a group of like-minded intensivists or a trained specialist, if they can make a difference in keeping the death rates low, because there was a sort of a huge surge in the cases and the people were dying. And the need of the hour was to take this expertise to the remote areas. And that we could not reproduce sort of a specialist in every district at that point of time. What we could possibly do at that point of time is try to homogenize the care, because the type of care that we were providing in a city like Bangalore, in some of the best hospitals, we could cater to a remote areas. And in fact, we came up with a position statement. And that was the first position statement we published in an index journal. And as we stand now, we are writing another position statement as to how telemedicine and in specific tele-ICU can be incorporated to save more lives at a macro level. So that is a bit of a background. So today the discussion is how this can sort of save more lives. So just to look into little statistics, just to create a little bit of a background. So it is shown, it is referenced in the published literature that 1 in 25 hospitalized patients, I'm sure many of you present here would know, that they have a serious sort of a adverse events within the hospital which otherwise could be prevented. And there are around 100,000 deaths that tend to happen. And this is comparable to more than 1 death in 1,000 interventions that happen in healthcare, which is sort of, when you compare to someone going on a flight, it is less than 1 death in 1 lakh. So that's the sort of corollary, which means when you are in a hospital, you are in a very high risk environment, and the risk of serious adverse events or death prevails in this patient. So that is where the whole question of technology comes in place to see how best we can reduce these sort of serious adverse events in patients. And as all of you would be aware, we do not want too much of burden on ICU by patients who get discharged from ICU coming back to ICU. And in fact, that's a quality indicator for us. That's once we send someone out from ICU, we don't want them coming back to ICU, because that puts a tremendous burden to the healthcare organization per se and increases the risk of patients dying and significantly increases the cost. So that is where the whole question comes for today's discussion. What is it that technology can enable us or can help us? So my first question to Dr. Murli would be, so what are the key components of these serious adverse events that typically happens in a hospital setting? And Dr. Murli, coming from anesthesia background, more so he would be dealing with more of complicated surgery patients who he would have done a fantastic job of doing a good anesthesia. But then something happens later in the night when patient is shifted to post-op room, he gets a call saying patient is not doing well. So what is it that really goes off, and what is it that, that we can do from technological standpoint? Dr. Murli.
Thank you, Pradeep. Thank you. Given a chance, I would want all my patients to be monitored all the time, even perhaps at home, as Alexander said, because the patients are vulnerable. So in a hospital setup, we try not to send patients out to the ward who are not fit to go to the ward. The very fact they go to the ward is that we are convinced that a patient is doing fairly well. We have some patient shift out criteria. We checklist them and make sure that everything is okay, and then we send them. And despite that, the serious adverse events do happen. And if somebody says that I have never seen a serious adverse event, I think he has not yet started a medical practice. All of us, unfortunately, have seen, and we are greatly disturbed by these. it can start with any system. Suppose we had done a cardiac surgery, we would expect the system to be first affected would be heart itself. Electrolyte abnormalities, arrhythmias, etc. We have seen many times patients coming out of the intensive care developing a stroke, a pulmonary embolism, hypothermia, apnea. All these are possible. And there was a question whether we should trust, whether we should accept, whether we should believe artificial intelligence. I think there is no other alternative because nobody else can monitor the patient so well. And at various levels, a flag can be raised, so we can easily attend to them. The trick is to attend to the patient at a stage where he is giving still a window of opportunity to reverse. If a patient has a hypotension, the artificial intelligence predicts hypotension based on the RR interval variability. If it can predict and call you 10-15 minutes before the hypotension, low blood pressure took place, I'm sure you can prevent a cardiac arrest. So, early warning sign, monitoring the early warning, modified early warning sign, we have been adding and deleting factors. But I think overall, one important point, which is the crux of the matter, is the perfusion of the patient. Is the patient breathing well? Is the patient's heart beating well? Is the organ getting perfused? That's all. If we can do that somehow, all the parameters that the Dozee gives, they really definitely help. So I would say that this is one is patient related. Patient is a known hypertensive, known diabetic, etc. Second is our operation, resulting from the operation itself. And the third one is the medications. All these can be captured by artificial intelligence. And one point which got missed out in the artificial intelligence discussion was, it self-learns. I think people, many doctors stop learning after their graduation and post-graduation, but artificial intelligence is good because it self-learns. So we are going to get more and more advanced information. So these are going to help the patient.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Murli. I think as he emphasizes, the crux of the whole ongoing healthcare would be to have some sort of a monitoring or another set of eye on the patient so that we can pick up these signs which indicate to us that possible deterioration would happen. Just to give a background to Dr. Jagdish, so the life expectancy is meant to increase to 70 years by 2025, and 16% of our population will be senior citizens in 2041. So taking that into background, Dr. Jagdish being a very senior physician who looks after patients, so when we sort of do a round, treat a patient, then we suddenly get a call saying that suddenly patient had a cardiac arrest or patient deteriorated and had a cardiac arrest. So this is sort of always a lingering misnomer for an intensivist like me, because no event happens so acutely. There are always certain trends that indicate, and there is always certain indicators that tell us the vulnerability of the patient, and there are certain variables that indicate. So there is when you go back to their sort of a monitored variable, there would be clear indicators to say this patient possibly is heading towards an impending disaster or a sentinel event. So Dr. Jagdish, so what do you think are these impending signs, and what are the indicators in a patient which indicate to you the heightened vulnerability of the patients, and the variables that would indicate that possibly sentinel event is going to happen, and what are those that you would wish to capture, Dr. Jagdish?
Yeah, Dr. Pradeep, I think that is an absolutely relevant aspect which we can't forget as clinicians during our day-to-day activities. From the moment the patient has been hospitalized till the moment he is discharged, when we are satisfied that the patient is fit to go home, this is one very relevant point we need to observe. You know, the whole aspect of the Dozee and all our artificial intelligence, what information that provides to us is a helping hand, making our life easier. But I think to start with, the whole aspect of care of the patient and the monitoring system is an automatic thing. It's not an overburdened exercise on us. It starts from the emergency where the patient could be hospitalized, or from your consultation chamber where the patient gets into the ward. There is always a good reason for the patient to be hospitalized there. And why does he get hospitalized? The basics of the knowledge, which we tend to forget quite often. The hospital administration forgets, and the doctor seems to forget nowadays, is that there is a reason patient has come to the hospital, because he couldn't manage, he couldn't tolerate his problems, and he did not know what was happening to him. It's the same, it is quite opposite. As a doctor, you are sitting in the opposite side to see which way, why it's imperative on you to understand why is this patient here. And you know, that's where your monitoring system starts. You start first trying to understand why the patient was here, and you make a provisional diagnosis, you put him into the wards, and then you start investigating. And the monitoring, let me tell you, the monitoring does not end till he leaves the hospital. Patient may be in the ICU, patient may be in the ward. Patient who is in the ward is quite often vulnerable. And as Dr. Pradeep rightly asked the question, what are these factors which makes you believe somebody is going down? It's absolutely right, it's always right. You know, whenever a patient died in an ICU setup or in a ward, we always tend to go back and check the charts, what really went wrong. It's absolutely true that patient never dies all of a sudden, except if it is a cardiac patient who has not still got into a primary treatment, primary therapy like an angioplasty, was waiting for that, or for a bypass surgery. So all others, there is a time lag period wherein patient's deterioration starts. Quite often we have seen patient in an ICU has suddenly died. You get a call at 3:30 a.m. that the patient suddenly died. When you go back and check the records, there is a deterioration which has gone on. Where is this recording system that went wrong? Quite often it happens. That's where probably Dozee could help us. But where is it, as clinicians, from out of the ICU, how do you monitor? It starts with a simple question to a patient: how is he feeling? Did he eat well? And how does he look? How does he answer to you? Does he answer to you well, properly? And is he cheerful enough to talk to you and tell you, I'm doing fine? And then what else do you do? You check, it is the key to a patient's getting better is the diagnosis. And if you did not know the diagnosis, you are in the process of diagnosing and declaring to yourself, I do not know yet. And then how do you proceed? Monitor till you know your diagnosis, till your medications are acting on the patient, and then he starts responding. Monitor, monitor, monitor. You start with telling a hello to your patient, how are you doing, what are you eating? You get an answer. That's where you know how is the patient doing. And the next question will be the vitals. How is your pulse? Is it different from what you saw in the morning when you entered the hospital? And by the time you leave, you want to go back to see the patient again. And is his pulse all right? What happened to his blood pressure? Is that same? How is he breathing? How is his temperature? And most importantly, is he feeling very comfortable? Is he answering you very cheerfully? Or how much did he pass urine? Very, very vital to monitor the patient. It need not, I always emphasize, monitoring is very, very vital to get to the root cause of the problem, to understand the problem if you didn't know, and if you already knew the diagnosis, how is he progressing? And then, has he come out of a state wherein no longer the monitoring is required? A sudden fall in blood pressure, a little fall about 20 to 30 millimeters, 10 to 20 millimeters, is it going down? Or a heart rate which suddenly jumps up? Or a breathing which is already becoming tachypnic? Or a situation when it is not passing urine? These are very simple, but that tells you how well the patient is doing. Is he improving or not? Is he dying? This applies to every single patient in the ward, regardless of whether or whatever his diagnosis. Just because he's out of the ICU, I strongly believe the patient has to be monitored in the present setup in a city like this, where we can afford to give everything best to the patient. The monitoring never ends till the clinician is satisfied. He is diagnosed, he has responded to the therapy, or we have diagnosed it. As the charts clarify, you know, you have a chart wherein the blood pressure is said to be 80. It needs to alarm us, and you need to respond to that immediately. And a pulse rate suddenly drops, which quite often happens, in any patient for various reasons. Quite often, even in COVID situations where the pulse rates were varying erratically, whether it was bradycardia or tachycardia or a respiration which was going up and down, there are very, very clear-cut ideas. Each one of that, if you combine two of the parameters which has gone off track for the given patient, that gives us a diagnosis. It should warn us. It should warn us something is wrong. We need to, what does it tell me? It's not the nurse who tells me. I need to come back and see the patient more often, find out the reason. If I don't know mule about it, think about it, and then come back to that. The criteria, a single criteria going down adds to the next one, and it gives you a complete picture. Is your diagnosis right? Are you approaching the patient properly? Are you examining the patient properly? How well you are going to make sure the patient is going to get well? It all plays on your mind. Dozee definitely helps us, but my own approach, my own diagnosis, my own involvement in the patient is something which gets the patient out of the hospital. This is what I'd like to.
Thank you, Dr. Jagdish. So just to give a little bit of a background, I think today the Netherlands has first announced that it is the first country in the world to have a comprehensive discharge criteria which is AI-based, and they have proved it to be very effective. So going forward, we would have some sort of an algorithms to help us or enable us to very, very precisely predict as to who can be effectively discharged from ICU with an intent that they don't come back. To that effect, when you look at statistics, it is said that all the major errors that happen, 66% of the time the problem lies with the patient, and 16% it is with the healthcare provider, and 14% is combination, and 4% is the combination of these. So considering ICU bed being very valuable, so Ullas is my good friend, worked overseas as well, looks after intensive care. So Ullas, we know that once we send a patient out of ICU, we hate to see these patients coming back because it really endangers them, and it has been shown scientifically that readmissions increases their risk of death, and it increases the financial burden to these families and to the patients as well. And it is a breach in our quality indicator, because that's one of the important quality indicator for an intensive care. So Ullas, when we talk about remote monitoring or a technology that enables us to have some sort of a monitoring, what are the key variables that you would wish to monitor? That is first question to you. And the second question is, who is the person that is going to decide as to what interventions has to be done when these go off? Because in ICU itself, we see we are very adept to monitoring a lot of variables, but still events happen in ICU. So the point I'm trying to emphasize is there are good technological interfaces at this point of time, but it is always the human factor also which plays a very important role, and the sort of SOPs that we put in place which makes a difference. And we showed this in COVID. COVID, we didn't have huge technology. We worked with rudimentary technology at the outset, but later on things evolved. And then we showed how a difference can be made by a good human intervention with regards to knowledge transfer that can happen, or imparting of best practice guidelines. So Ullas, this is the second question to you. The first one is, what are the key variables that you would wish to monitor to a patient who is shifted out of ICU, who you believe is vulnerable? And the sub-question is, who are the patients you deem are more vulnerable? Ullas, a lot of questions, but Ullas is the right person to take this.
I'll take the first one. So what are the criteria? I think most early warning systems have incorporated these 5 criteria, which is the pulse, the saturations, the consciousness levels, temperature, and the blood pressure. But I would still give a lot of importance. When we first started using early warning system scoring in the UK, something which overrode all these things was a nurse being concerned about the patient. I think if a nurse who's eyeballing the patient, who's looking at the patient, is concerned about anything, I would not wait for somebody to record their pulse, blood pressures. Okay, a nurse is somebody who spends time with the patient, and if the nurse is concerned, I think that was the most important criteria for ICU to go and have a look at the patient. Having said that, it's almost impossible to keep watching the patient all the time. So what Dozee does or what the early warning score does is a fantastic thing. And over time, even in hospitals in India, at Manipal, Fortis, we have seen that using the early warning score in the right way actually, almost reduces the code blue calls to zero. Yeah, if you anticipate a patient going down, you can prevent them from having a cardiac arrest. The patient may still come to the ICU and die. We are not saying that it will improve outcomes, but at least it will reduce the number of code blues and the panic associated with it. Pradeep, the second part, can you ask me the question again?
Yeah, the second one is, so how would you incorporate this into your thing, and who are the people who should be intervening here?
Yeah, that's where my problem is. I think a lot of discussions have happened over doctors being anti-technology. I certainly don't think so. I think we are one of the most, we have a very open mind towards technology. We have to be convinced that it helps the patient. That's the only thing. During COVID pandemic, I've had meetings with at least 4 startups who thought they had a brilliant idea with them, okay, which actually was very ridiculous. So, you don't want to be wasting time on something which is not proven or which actually doesn't help the patient at all. So, my problem is, as somebody said, patient-centric and patient should benefit. And who's going to monitor all the information that's being generated? Yeah. I'm worried about the noise, the unnecessary calls. You will have to imagine that ICU is a very busy place, and there will be probably 2 or 3 qualified doctors looking after very sick patients. You don't want to be called out for a false alarm. How are you reducing the noise? How are you reducing the false alarms? I think these are very important issues. Yeah? And my other main worry is, what if in the future the patient's family asks for the records, and if you have not acted upon a red alert? That's a huge worry for me, and that could turn out to be a medical legal problem that nobody wants to go through. So I think these things are something that the administration and the the technology people have to sort out.
Yeah. Thank you, Ullas. I think the one major question when we talk about technology is fantastic. Now we have a lot of players working on having a good sort of a remote monitoring. So the question, maybe this is the last round. So the question I would have for Dr. Murli is, so how comfortable would he feel in, being bombarded with these sort of a monitored variables? Because as Ullas said, there is a truckloads of heaps of sort of a monitoring data that would be showcased to him. But the crux of the issue is who is going to act upon all that monitored variables? Because for us, when we talk about telemedicine or a tele-ICU, either it is a continuous process or it is a transitional sort of a process, which is a cross-sectional sort of a process, which means whether you do the continuous monitoring or whether you do as a snapshot, and who are the people who at the end of the day become accountable, and whether there's going to be some sort of a digital command center that needs to be established in every healthcare organization where there is a person accountable who is capturing all these variables, interpreting it and acting upon it and then escalating it to a person like Dr. Murli? Or how is it that is envisaging? Because technology is there. How do we effectively utilize it in a continuous way or in a transitional way or in a cross-sectional way? And who is going to be accountable? So are we talking about setting up some sort of a digital command center? Because this is the one we were very heavily deliberating upon when we were in the thick of COVID. So Murli, your thoughts on that?
I think this has been the point. What Ullas said was what we discussed in our hospital matrix meeting, our academic meeting, when a similar platform was presented. And you are bang right on the point that you should have a digital command center or whatever you call it, but release the nurses and the doctors working in the hospital from monitoring this, because it is virtually impossible to monitor this. And this need not be in the hospital. It can be outsourced. It can be work from home kind of option. That person has to escalate. And I don't want to have it. They say that it's available on your mobile. Already I have a screen time, I want to escape from that. I don't want to be watching the mobile of my patients I can be told that our patient has a problem, can you comment on the rhythm or the IABP functioning? I could get in at that time, but I can't be doing it. So number one, it has to be somebody outside. And number two, we are grossly underutilizing our nurses, some of them are fantastic. If my nurse tells me I don't want to shift the patient, I will not shift the patient. Like Ullas said, nurses feeling good about the patient. And also, at some point in time, we did empower our nurses to take a call to shift a patient, and the transfer to the ICU was not billed to the patient, and the nurse was never asked a question, why did you transfer this patient? You know, even 1 in a 10 capture of saving a patient is good enough. You are right. It cannot be the doctors working. Perhaps a hospitalist kind of a thing is somebody who's on the move all the time, is somebody who can take care, who's empowered. And some of the intensive care nurses are smart. They could be sent to the ward as an outreach, and they could do it.
Yeah. I think that's a great words of wisdom, because what really happened in COVID, I'll share the real example, because when we were asked to cater to the district's tele-ICU, because we were busy ourselves in ICU, the way we did was we had to put a rota as to who would be interested, who is not working and who is not on floor, and even the elderly clinicians who would not possibly work in hospitals or ICU, we utilized them as well to partner with us, because they are very senior people, very elderly people, elderly clinicians who we utilized during our care delivery during that process, because they would be more than happy to be at home delivering this sort of a telecare. So going forward, it has to be some sort of a digital command center with an accountable personnel leading it and capturing the variables in a very committed way. It cannot be an active clinician who is on floor, and Dr. Murali Chakravarti who would have done day-long OT, and you cannot expect that he captures the variables in the middle of the night and acts upon. So this is where the whole dichotomy is. Maybe quick thoughts from Dr. Jagdish as well on this, as to how he would want to look at it, because you would see the patients all day, and you would put them on a remote monitor. So how would you look at it? You would want another group of people who are answerable to you to monitor them, or is it that you would want to be involved in the whole capturing the monitored variables?
Yeah, I think, Pradeep, it is an absolutely relevant question. You know, I would want somebody else to do, because I can't be doing all the time. But I would want every change that happens to the patient, which my junior may not be able to understand the significance of the change that has happened, to be informed to me. And wherever I am interested, I would rather call them and check what's going on. And then, and that's the way it should go forward. Yeah. You know, the monitoring, absolutely. And the nurses doing is a far-fetched thing in our country at the moment, because only 20% of them are good enough to be doing all this. And if the doctor, and I think the primary responsibility of us is to train our junior people. What are we doing? What's my diagnosis? What am I thinking about my patient? How do I anticipate the problems? How do they come up? And what are the things they should monitor? And if they do not understand, they need to get back to me any time of the day. I think it's a coordinated effort that's going to give us the best of the results.
Yeah, thank you. And the question to Ullas is, see, I said it is dichotomous situation or a diabolical situation, because what this has led, because Murli and Jagdish have said that we don't want to be bothered in capturing all these monitored variables remotely, but what this has led is to a sort of a classroom-based care delivery people. So who are not actively working in hospitals, but who are claiming to deliver good sort of a tele-ICU or maybe tele-health sort of a services, which is also not the ideal, because if you look at all the literature, in fact, in the position statement, we put it very clearly that people who should be delivering care are who are active clinicians who are involved in the patient care and who look after tele-ICU as part of their whole work schedule in a month sort of a situation, and not someone who is only doing that and not involved in day-to-day. Because why I say that is, the future of healthcare is going to be acute care and long-term care, because we are talking about monitoring this patient in home care. So it is desirable that the clinical team which are involved in the care of the patient is somehow do it as an extended care with their own team in some sort of a digital command center format. So I would want this question to be answered by Ullas. What does he think about people who work in silos, who are not really actively involved on floor delivery of care, but they're operating from the rooms, delivering care, not necessarily knowing the whole background or the family dynamics or socio-cultural dynamics. So, because this is happening as we speak at the home care front and in ICU as well. So I want your comments on that, Ullas.
Yeah, a consultant of mine used to say, monitor only those parameters that you can make a difference to. Yeah. We have discharged patients for various reasons. Some patients who don't get better go home to die, but the family still wants some monitoring going on. Yeah? And then if you start feeding me that data about a fast heart rate or a low blood pressure, I'm at a loss to tell them what to do. So I think it has to be comprehensive. It is still in its infancy. I think things will probably evolve over a period of time. But I totally agree with you that a team of people who are not involved in actual care of the patient should not be monitoring. But then if I'm not willing to do it myself, having spent the whole day in the ICU, we'll have to, maybe the companies coming up with this should have a team of their own with definite legal responsibilities, medical responsibilities defined. I think that is probably one of the ways that can be done.
Yeah. So I think we have covered most of the things. I think one question I have for Dozee is, because see in ICU, even when we talk about acute care patient, we want to mobilize them pretty early on. And Murli would agree with me that he would want to mobilize his post-op patient very early on to a chair. And so would Ullas. In fact, we are talking about mobilizing ventilated patients. And this is also one of an important aspect. Now, looking at the whole science behind the Dozee, which is confined to a bed, which is something I would ask a question, maybe we can discuss it later, as to when we start mobilizing, the events happen. Because the sentinel events, very often, I'm sure many of my panelists would agree, they go to a toilet and they collapse, or they're trying to mobilize and they fall down. So there are a lot of monitored variables that need to be captured during mobilization. And here, if it is sort of confined to the bed space, the automatic question that comes to my mind is, am I limited in mobilizing the patients? So that is one question for our team here. So thank you very much. So I think we had an excellent discussion on the clinical domain of this whole telemonitoring. So thank you one and all.
Thank you, Dr. Pradeep Rangappa, for moderating the session wonderfully. Thank you, Dr. Murli. Thank you, Dr. Jagdish, and thank you, Dr. Ullas, for the wonderful session. Thank you very much. Now it's time, ladies and gentlemen, to recognize the nurses for their hard work that they've put in all through these years. We'd like all of you to please give them a big hand as we recognize their hard work and efforts. Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you very much, sir, for doing the honors. Please be seated. And once again, congratulations to all the nurses out there who've just received an award. And thank you very much for the support that you've always been doing. And yes, congratulations once again and all the very best. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, with this, we come to the end of today's program. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Nicole Adams. Thank you very much once again.